Zoro mains are going to rejoice as Elden Ring had one weapon improved more than any other in the DLC, and that would be the weapon of the weeb variety, the katanas. And this recent patch made them even more ridiculous. Now, for those that don't know, the katanas are a fan favorite weapon that favor the dexterity attribute, which is also probably a big reason why they're despised. The big thing about katanas is they usually prefer a one-handed moveset, and that is because their power stance moveset as well as their two-handed moveset kind of aren't that great. That is outside of their roll attack, jump attack, and crouch attack. So you may wonder, how did this weapon end up shining above the rest? How does the katana even compete with the straight swords, the curved swords, and the weapons buffed by the two-handed sword talisman, which is one of the best talismans in the game, buffing some of the most popular builds by 15%. I mean, 15% is a huge increase in damage, even if it does not include skills and backstabs. However, katanas don't get much out of this, because they don't get much out of their two-handed moveset. However, what katanas did get is the lettuce armor and the retaliatory cross-tree talisman, which give a plus 10 and plus 15 to the main part of a power stance katana's build. Which is a bizarre claim that you might want to kill me over, but it's the very nature of the katanas themselves and their power stance moveset that make this work. And in practice, it makes a huge difference. But then with patch 1.14, we got two other major changes. Renala's cameo was given a massive buff, making some of the best Ashes of War in the game outright broken. And this includes the already very powerful Unsheath, as well as its variant, Transient Moonlight. However, the most underrated change was a buff to the katana's base moveset, and that was a buff to the uncharged heavy attacks. I mean, it doesn't seem like much, right? Well, let's just say the uncharged heavies now come out extremely fast. So much so that it made the Serpent Bone Blade a very formidable weapon, when previously it was just too slow to use. So when you look at katanas, they're given more buffs than any other setup, including two-handed builds, with the exception of guard counter setups. In fact, katanas got about a 30% overall increase in damage from this DLC. So let's go ahead and explain the most confusing one. That's going to be Letta's armor and the retaliatory cross-tree talisman. So how does it give it that much of a boost? Well, simple. It increases the damage of roll attacks and backstab attacks. Now, that doesn't really make for a 30% increase in damage. However, there's one thing it buffs that it doesn't tell you, and that is crouch attacks. And that is massive because Katana's crouch attacks are the best part of their dual wield setup. In fact, even before all these changes, that's what you should be doing outside of jump attacks. And no, I'm not just talking about PvP. For PvE as well, there is no reason why you should not be doing crouch attacks, unless it happens to be very difficult for you to pull off due to the type of controller you use. I mean, let's do this one comparison. If you're trying to do your regular neutral attacks, they're going to be delayed, they're going to be slow, and you're not going to really get that many hits off within a short period of time. They also don't have great motion values. Compare this to the crouch attack, which crouch attack for the katanas have one of the highest motion values for any power stance weapon in the game, but more importantly, they come out fast and they use the entirety of the range of the weapon. And the recovery animations is almost instantaneous. It is incredibly quick, to the point where there's no reason why you shouldn't be doing this. Additionally, the change to the heavy attacks, specifically your first one being faster, it is now faster than your light attacks, even on the ones that hit twice. And that's a big deal because now you can exploit more openings than you previously could. And just a note, Katanas had some pretty good heavy attacks prior to these changes, so just being able to use them in shorter windows is amazing. However, that's not what most people are talking about. There's a change that's a bit more relevant, and for most players is the highlight of the patch. And this is the buff to Stance Ashes of War via Renala's cameo. And this change was absolutely massive. Prior to the recent patch, you had to wait for almost 2 seconds, and you only got a 15% increase in damage. That made it objectively worse than something like the Shard of Alexander. However, now it is exactly 1 second for a 45% increase in damage. Effectively, it changed from something that forced you to stay there and place up optimally, to mean something that, with a small test of patience, you could increase your damage significantly. That is a 5 times improvement compared to what it previously was. Now people are going in rounds and talking about it, believing it was a mistake, because that is just an absurd change. And to be honest, it's quite justified because you're still having to wait a second for a 45% increase in damage. It's not going to be an absolute game changer in PvP, it just makes it so if you telegraph your ability, that you could do a massive increase in damage. However, it is clearly still telegraphed, so it is avoidable. However, this pushes two katanas, which are already amazing weapons, to an absurd degree, and that would be the Nagakiba and the Moonveil. And so when you take a step back and look at this, you look at, okay, cool, it buffed the Stance Ashes War by a significant amount, approximately about 35% give or take, while also buffing the crouch attacks by 30%. And the heavy attacks, that right there is just more attacks you can make in openings you never could make before. And the two builds that benefit the most out of this is a pure dex build, as well as an int dex build. Now, if you're playing a level 150 build, these are the stats I recommend for these setups. When going a pure dex build, I'd either recommend a Lightning or Keen Nagakiba with Unsheath, with the Hand of Millennia on the offhand. And with a int dex build, I'd recommend a Moonveil with a Cold or Magic Nagakiba on the offhand. However, you could alter this if you want to use something like the Starline Sword. Now, out of all these, which one I recommend the most? Really, the pure dexterity setup is going to give you the most mileage overall. It's simply just going to do more damage with the Unsheath versus Transient Moonlight, and you get weapons with more reach and a higher AR, in addition to being much more FP friendly. However, the int setup does give you Moonveil, which has Transient Moonlight, and that projectile is absolutely amazing, and the distance you need to go, you could definitely capitalize on the Bernalis cameo. The issue is, it's going to be doing less damage, and it's going to be harder to hit with the blade. Now, when you're looking for the recommended talismans, it would be Milton's Prosthesis, the Winged Sword Insignia, Rilana's Cameo, and either the Retaliatory Cross Tree Talisman or the Shard of Alexander. Now, with the exception of Letta's armor, you could pretty much go with whatever piece of equipment you want to wear. I'm just wearing the Rixosha's Greaves and the Rixosha's Gauntlets just for that slight increase in damage, but you could really wear whatever. This is just to come to say that, outside of guard counters, katanas were just given the most out of every single vanilla build. Now, are there some DLC builds that are going to be outperforming this? Of course, I mean, backhand blades exist, and they can do this quite easily. Plus, you got weapons like the Sword Lance, which are just incredible. However, do not sleep on the humble katana, because they went from being good options to being absolutely amazing. Thank you for getting this far in the video. Please consider liking and subscribing. I hope this information is useful, and have an awesome day.